Hello, this short presentation is going to look at providing effective feedback and implementing practice observation forms in your services. In the first section of the presentation, we're going to look at 4 strategies you can incorporate when providing feedback. This should improve the quality of the feedback you provide and also improve the opportunity that staff have for learning and development from the practice observation process. So if we start with a little bit of reflection, think of a time when you've received really good feedback on your performance. And now I want you just to spend a moment thinking about what it was that made that feedback so good. Now, hopefully, you'll be able to link what you just thought about was good from feedback you've received to these 4 strategies that we're going to look at in a bit more detail now. So the 4 strategies are making feedback specific, actionable, timely, and respectful. So when we talk about making sure that feedback's specific, we mean that you've got to make sure that it's linked to specific actions or behaviours that you've observed. So to help you stay focused on making sure that the feedback's specific, you can use these 2 questions. So what worked well and what needs improvement? And that's the core of what you really want to provide from feedback. When I provide feedback, I always find it useful to ask the person those questions. In that way, you can get a good understanding of how they perceive their own practice, but also they might pick up on the things that you'd identified themselves, and that can really put the conversation at ease and help shape the discussion. The other aspect is that you don't have to pick up on everything. Feedback's an ongoing process and you're going to revisit this, so don't overwhelm a person. And also there's only so much they're going to be able to work on at any one time. So choose the most important things. What's going to have the most significant impact on their practice? So on to our second point, making sure that feedback is actionable. They have to clearly see that they can do something different next time, and it should be framed in a positive light. So maybe you could try this rather than you've done that wrong. So feedback is most effective when it's timely, and by that we mean trying to do it immediately after the observation has taken place and trying to provide it regularly and as frequently as possible. This will embed it into part of day-to-day practice and help people to feel comfortable with the process. So our final point then is that feedback should be respectful, looking for good points while still looking for actions for improvement. One thing that's suggested here is that you might want to use I statements. They're less confrontational. So if you tell somebody you did that wrong or you didn't do this, you can approach it from a different perspective. For example, saying, I usually do it this way. What do you think about that? Or I find that this works better. What do you think? So you're not telling them that they're wrong and you're right. You're opening up a discussion of how things can be done differently. So there we have it. Those are 4 strategies that you can use to improve the feedback you give to your staff. I hope you find that helpful. Now let's go on to look at the practice observation form. Okay, so the practice observation form has been developed as a way of supporting services to carry out direct observations of staff in a fair and consistent manner. In the past, we've always done this, but there's been no standardisation. So we're trying to make sure that the process is improved for everyone. So the form has been structured to guide managers through the process, ensuring that all relevant areas of practice are observed and considered. And it links directly to Scope's behaviours in the PDP process, so it can provide evidence to support discussions around individual performance and inform PDP ratings. So we're going to work through the form and look at each section in turn. So the start of the form is quite self-explanatory. It explains what the form is, and it also says that it needs to be completed every 3 months for support workers and team coordinators by their line manager. So you're just going to record the name of the staff member, who's doing the observation, the date and time, and if it's a specific practice area, for example, medication or a meal time. So the second section of the form allows managers to quickly rate the member of staff against a range of practice areas which are all linked to Scope's behaviours. Ratings are given that are aligned to the PDP ratings of outstanding, exceeding, succeeding, partially meeting, not meeting, and not observed. This is for if you didn't observe that specific area during that session. So we've tried to provide clear guidance under each headings to support managers to know what to look for while observing employees. And on the opposite side, it means that support workers and team leaders know what things their manager will be looking for. We think this should be really helpful for new managers. It's not an exhaustive list, but it does go some way to set the standards that Scope's looking for. When we did the pilot, some managers fed back that they would prefer to have more space in this section to make comments on specific areas. We've intentionally limited more detailed feedback to page 2 of the form. This partly saves time for the manager, but also we'll go on to talk about the rationale for that in the next sections. So as we discussed earlier in the presentation, it's important that staff find receiving feedback a positive experience and that it focuses on the good as well as areas which need improvement. It's important to link any feedback you give to specific practice. So for example, when you gave Ben a drink, you communicated with him really well and clearly put him at ease, rather than just saying, I thought your communication was really good. Again, as we discussed earlier, this is a good opportunity to ask the person to say what they think went well, to help guide your discussions. As with the learning points section, which is coming up, feedback's limited to 3 specific points. This is done intentionally because people can only take in so much feedback in a single session. Remember that the practice observations are an ongoing process which will be repeated every 3 months. So it's important to focus on a limited number of things each time, especially in the section on learning points, which can then be built over time. So learning points allow us to give the person clear practical examples of ways they can improve. Again, the points are limited to 3. This is an ongoing process and you don't need to cover everything at once. Pick the most important learning points to address. You don't want to overwhelm the person or make them feel terrible about the way they do their work. Please be aware, though, that learning points are about practice improvement. If you observe unsafe practice, you'll need to act on this and you may need to consider safeguarding capability or disciplinary procedures. So identifying and agreeing actions to be taken shows that we have a commitment to continuous improvement as an organisation. This provides valuable evidence to demonstrate that your service is good or outstanding, helps staff understand what's expected of them, and gives them evidence for supervision and the PDP process. There's evidence to show that writing and recording actions can motivate people to complete them. So from that perspective, it's definitely worth getting things written down and committed to. So sections 6 and 7 allow staff and customers to comment on the forms and the feedback if they wish to. As the document is a joint discussion, it's important that both the manager and the staff member can contribute to it. If appropriate, you may also want to ask a customer who's being supported to provide feedback on the experience. You could ask them prior to the observation or before giving the feedback. If both staff and customer are happy to do so, the customer could actually take part in the feedback discussion. And then finally, both the staff and the observer sign and date the form to show that they both agree that it's accurate. So that concludes this presentation on feedback and the practice observation forms. If you think you'd still need further help and guidance, You can read the guidance document which accompanies this presentation. You could ask your line manager for additional support. They may allow you to observe them undertaking a direct observation, or they could observe you and provide helpful feedback. If you feel you need more training, guidance or support, then you can always contact me, Chris Mackay, at the email address listed on this slide. Thank you.